After this decentralizing exercise that has truly touched me about this practice of being present and this love that allows this present, the conversation around this idea that we've mentioned about giving everything, giving it all in the present moment, has encouraged us to request Anne part of the Trobades family, without a doubt, one of the Camusian voices, uh, embodying more rigor as a writer, professor who's dedicated years to explore Camus' work as object of her study and as a guiding the North Star in her career. She will close this 10th edition actually with the title of Giving It Your All in the Present. It will not only be part of a Camusian debate, but it will surely be guiding enlightenment for all of us. I'm looking forward to listening to you. Thank you, Anne.
Bonjour, vraiment, je vois personne, hein, mais bon,
I
vous me
can't
voyez.
see
Bonjour à tous.
anyone. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much. Thank you, Sandra, Carlos. Thank you to the Trovadas. I feel really as a friend after all these years. It's been a true privilege for us to lead these gatherings. And I wanted to say something. I don't know if Sand is still there, because
Elle me faisait penser à une
she helped
nouvelle
me
qui
think
avait été écrite
about
dans l'exil au royaume qui s'appelle
in the exile and the
en français, je voudrais vous
realm
rappeler que
called
l'hôte
Haute.
est
L'hôte
aussi à la
in
fois celui qui
French
invite,
is sometimes
à la fois
the
celui qui est invité,
person,
pas à distance.
the
Je ne sais pas
guest,
si elle est là
or
dans la
the
salle.
host. I don't know
Alors
whether
merci
she's
Sandra
there.
de
So
tu
thank
demandes
you,
de revenir
Sandra.
au texte et de revenir à
You
Camus.
have
Donc c'est ce que je
requested
vous
me
propose
to go
pendant ces
back
quelques
to
minutes à
Camusian's
travers cette
ideas. So
phrase, la vraie
here we
générosité
go. The true
entre
generosity
l'avenir
towards
consiste
the
à
future
aimer le
consists in
présent.
giving everything to the
Alors, vous
present.
savez, c'est à la fin
So,
de
as you
l'Empire
know, this
terrible,
is at the
le
end of The
6 juillet
Rebel
1851,
in
le dernier homme
1951,
exerce cette
where
faculté
Camus
particulière
enthuses this
d'être
particular way of being in the
tourné
world.
au présent.
Giving everything to
Et
the
c'est pas du
present
tout
is
une
not
phrase
a
faite
phrase
par hasard ou par
written by
coïncidence,
chance
parce
by
que depuis
Camus,
longtemps,
because for a long
c'était sa
time,
vie.
his entire
Et
life
dans ce
had been
rapport très
committed to this
particulier
very
avec le temps,
particular relationship with
on peut
time.
vraiment évoquer
Yes, we can
une
speak of a
poétique du
poetics
présent
of the
qui
present that
traditionnelle,
permeates his
un rapport
work,
au
his
paysage,
relationship
aux
with
personnages,
landscapes,
aux personnes,
characters,
et
and
qui
people,
engage, on le verra
and
dans
which,
le
as we
livre,
shall
une
see, even
réflexion.
informs a
Alors, je vous
political
propose
stance.
quelques
I would
réflexions
like to
sur
offer a
cette
few
poétique
comments on this
centrale chez Camus.
central idea in
En
Camus'
commençant,
work.
je voudrais rappeler
To
finalement
begin with, I'd
deux
like to
aspects
highlight
très
two
importants
very
qui
concrete aspects
conditionnent
that
ce
shape
rapport au présent,
Camus'
qui sont par
relationship
hasard et
with the
qui
present
coïncident.
time. It's not out of chance
Mais d'abord,
that this
l'Algérie.
happened.
Comme
First of
vous le
all,
savez, comme on
Algeria.
le sait,
As you
Camus est né
know,
en Algérie.
Camus was
Et
born
son
in
ami
Algeria,
Jean
and
Grenier,
his
qui était
friend Jean Grenier said,
disait
he was a
pour
philosophy
parler
teacher.
d'Albert
To
Camus,
speak of
il
Albert
faut
Camus,
d'abord
one would
parler
first have to
d'Algérie.
speak of
Non
Algeria,
pour
not to
l'expliquer par
explain
son
him
pays,
through his
mais
country, but
parce que
because
des
certain traits of
explications
his
ne
character
peuvent se
can only be
comprendre
understood through it.
Et effectivement,
Camus
depuis le
indeed
Trésor et les
elaborates
Noces,
in
donc
his
c'est en
Nos, the
1939,
Nuptials, published in
son,
1939,
son deuxième texte
his
paru,
second
dans le chapitre L'été en
publication in
Algérie,
the
il
chapter
commence
Summer
par
in
une citation.
Algiers. He says,
Ce pays
This country offers no lessons. It neither promises nor offers a glimpse of what lies ahead. It is content to give, but in abundance. The relationship with the present among the people of Algiers doesn't stem from a theoretical concept or a highly elaborate philosophy of life. These companions from Algiers with whom he shared his childhood and of whom he makes an almost sociological study in Nos have neither a sense of sin nor of eternity. They know only the present. It's a joie de vivre without a future. Lacking material possessions or wealth, like in Camus and his family, they live in constant contact with nature. And Camus says, these entire people, cast into the present, live without myths, without consolation. And he continues, everything we do here reflects a carefree attitude towards the future. What matters are those truths that the hand can touch. The truth of the world lies in the tangible and the concrete. Algeria offers him immediate contact with beauty and compels him to embrace the unique and fleeting nature of the moment. He reiterates his commitment to rejecting at all the latters of the world and not to relinquish his present wealth. Just as a theater stage or a football stadium contributes to one's education, Algeria is a land of learning. Yet the lessons it imparts are not unambiguous. Proof of this is the other, more austere side of the present, embodied by the town of Jemila, again from the same collection, Nos. It's a town swept by a wind that leads nowhere and opens onto no country. The chapter devoted to it in Nos bears the mark of, this time, death. In this landscape polished by the wind, which encourages a courageous lucidity, the narrator has a different experience of time. Yes, he says, I am present. And what strikes me at this moment is that I cannot go any further. Like a man imprisoned for life, and everything is present to him. In this singular landscape, he finds the courage to face the inevitability of his death. I quote, for me, before this world, I do not wish to lie, nor do I wish to be lied to. To live in the present moment is to face one's finitude with lucidity. He says, I want to carry my lucidity through to the end and look upon my end with all the intensity of my jealousy and my horror. And he's a young man when he says this. He was only 25. And why does he say this? Because the sad song of Jamila brings him back to his death, back to the second defining element of Camus' life, defining his relationship with present, his illness. So, as you know, Camus' tuberculosis, discovered when he was diagnosed when he was 17, as he began to cough up blood, undoubtedly had a profound impact on his life. Until the age of 30, he suffered three bouts of tuberculosis that forced him to interrupt his studies and various activities. In particular, he was denied the medical certificate required to become a teacher. And the sunlight, the dazzling light of the sun, it was rupture for him. The sensation of death, he says, which is now familiar to me, to sense death at the mere sight of a handkerchief stained with blood. From then on, throughout his life, he lived with his sick, weakened body, which would regularly force him to take long breaks to spend time in the mountains, a prospect that didn't please the Mediterranean man. It was thus that he spent 15 months during the Second World War in Les Chambons-sur-Lignon, a French village, between 1942 and 43. A body in pain inevitably brings one back to the present. On rereading his travel journals, one comes to understand his companionship imposed on Camus by his illness. For this, travel journals allow him to follow him almost daily. During a trip to Italy, there is talk of fevers, enforced rest, and illness. And I quote, all day in bed with a fever that won't subside. Fortunately, I can see the sea from my bed. 11th of December, in bed all day or almost, a feverish state that takes away my appetite for everything. I need my strength. The same, for example, in 1949 in Brazil, in bed with a fever, flu, the 26th and 27th of August, two dreadful days when I drag out my flu in indifference. So these are just a few examples that show that illness is not merely a figment of the imagination, but a constant companion. Although it should be noted that apart from when traveling, Camus remains discreet on this subject. So illness teaches him the value of time. He quotes illness and its decline. There is not a minute to lose, which is perhaps the opposite of we must hurry. A striking statement that testifies the maturity of the patient, who doesn't confuse intensity with haste or intensity with agitation, but rather suggesting a deepening of the present moment. Elsewhere, he confides, I quote, what is degrading but all suffering, not letting oneself be swept away by emptiness, trying to overcome and to fill time not to be wasted. At first glance, one may think that the omnipresence of death lets a distance for existence, discouraging one from living and rendering one insensitive to everything that is happening. But most of the time, presence of death fundamentally heightens his love of life. This sense of urgency that haunts Camus and this certainty that everything must die one day are the consequences of his experience of an illness that at the time was still fatal. He evokes his sense of precariousness again in the Wrong Side and the Right Side in 1937, the first text published, when he says, I quote, there lay all my love of life, a silent passion for what might perhaps slip away from me, a bitterness beneath a flame. Every day I left that cloister as if snatched from myself, inscribed for a brief moment in the duration of the world. There are numerous accounts from Camus' contemporaries who noted this sense of urgency in him. Thus, Jean Grenier said, but the author of The Plague was in a hurry. His time was limited, so was his work. He had to move quickly. I sense in the man and in the work the spur of necessity. This sense of urgency is reinforced by Camus' exceptional awareness of the gravity of the issues at stake. As he wrote to Jean Grenier as early as 1935, he was 22 back then. I quote, I have such a strong desire to see a reduction in the sum of misery and bitterness that poisons people's lives. Such a statement bears witness to an early ethical commitment that led him to focus his attention on those most exposed to suffering, the poor and the humiliated. It is worth noting that these numerous reflections that um, are an evidence, again, in the present time, as if poverty and poor people were um, taken or lacked projection. There are numerous examples of in Le Premier Homme, The First Man, which was published posthumously. It was a great inspiration. In The First Man, the main character, who actually is this cleaning lady belonging, and this is the object of this, and I quote here, with no other plan than the immediate.
According to the narrator, Lucy is the submissive slave of days and of life. Incapable of the slightest attempt to master time, incapable of the slightest choice, This simply displays a blind patience. Camus had also planned to begin this image metaphor of the mother, the blind donkey that patiently for years circles the water wheel. The image is distressing, yet extremely telling. It confirms the negation of prospects that leads to stagnation. All the terms used by the narrator convey a narrow view, the absence of a horizon, of a horizon, like a curse of poverty that is barely bearable in the narrator's eyes. In a completely different context, we might consider a series of newspaper articles devoted to poverty. So, this is the Camus as a journalist. So, it's a set of 11 articles devoted to poverty in Kabylie in 1939. In these newspaper articles, Camus denounces the excesses of colonialism and is appalled by the living conditions of the inhabitants. He seems deeply moved by the poverty, which results in an inability to lose oneself in the moment, particularly in the beauty of an evening. And I quote, "And at this hour, when the shadow descending from the mountains upon this splendid land brings a sense of calm to even the hardest of hearts, I knew, nevertheless, that there was no peace for those who, on the other side of the valley, were gathering around a flatbread. I also knew that there would have been a sweetness in surrendering to this evening, so surprising and so magnificent, but that this misery, whose fires glowed before us, cast a kind of man on the beauty of the world." We know the price that these daring articles denouncing the excesses of colonialism exacted from the 26-year-old journalist who dared to stand up to the colonial administration. Here, the poor, crying out in hunger, are trapped in this narrow present, denied access to the gentle twilight of the falling evening, excluded from the experience of beauty. The supreme misfortune is to lack sky or light. The origin of the demand for justice that never ceases to drive Camus stems from this scandal. Unable to grasp the truths within their grasp, imprisoned in a present that cuts them off from the beauty of the world, preoccupied as they are with their survival. Like the character of the mother in the wrong side and right side, who, after her day as a cleaner, can only lose herself in the frantic pursuit of a groove in the floorboards. That as many people as possible might have access, even fleetingly, to the beauty of the world as it reveals itself um, to those who can surrender to it. It seems to me that Camus, out of a sense of fraternity, wished for this. It is difficult to let oneself be carried away alone by the tenderness of twilight when beside you the other is prevented from doing so. True generosity towards the future consists in giving everything to the present. It is precisely a present that is open to the future, a creative present. Camus was moved by the plight of those deprived of a present dignified enough to allow them to still look upon the world. In The Rebel, the writer focuses on the figure of the man who, in the depths of his being, cries out for justice in the face of evil. This inner rebellion becomes a generous defense of humanity and solidarity with the humiliated in the present moment. And I quote, this mad generosity is that of the revolt, which immediately gives its strength of love and unhesitantly rejects injustice. The honor of generosity lies in calculating nothing and giving everything to the present moment and to one's living brothers. The generosity towards the future consists in giving everything to the present. In The Rebel, Camus firmly opposed ideologies particularly certain strands of Marxism that asserted that one must accept a dictatorship or violence today to guarantee a utopia or perfect justice tomorrow. For Camus, the future is hypothetical. If an injustice is committed today, it is real and concrete. He advocated what he called the midi thinking or midday thinking, a form of revolt that rejects extremes and never sacrifices living human beings on the altar of abstract idea. Camus concludes his essay by contrasting the excesses of totalitarian ideologies with the moderation of revolt. He writes further in the same chapter, does the end justify the means? That is possible, but who will justify the end? To this question, which historical thought leaves unanswered, revolt replies, the means. It is here that Camus defines his ethical limit by rejecting political messianism, sacrificing present generations for a future paradise. He also asserts that justice cannot arise from its opposite. If the means are unjust, the end will necessarily be so. So give everything to the present. For Camus, constantly projecting oneself into the future is an escape. It is a way of avoiding confronting immediate injustice, and true generosity is not a promise of a bright future, but a total commitment to the person standing before us. To give to the present is to create, to love, to fight without expecting any historical or divine reward. It is a call to live intensely and ethically without allowing oneself to be blinded by hope, which for him is a form of resignation, or by despair, which could paralyze us. To give everything to the present so that everyone may face this present without bowing down, without enduring it, but by exhausting the field of the possible, to borrow Pindar's phrase, having the strength to live a creative present. In the light, writes Camus on the final page of The Rebel, the world remains our first and last love. Our brothers breathe under the same sky as we do. Justice is alive. Yes, it is indeed here and now that fraternity is put to this test. And we've understood what this means right now with no delays. And we've seen these during these 2 days in our places, in our territories, in our scale. Thank you.
Qui veut rebondir sur ce que tu as dit?
Would you like to say what or respond?
Merci Anne, c'était très beau, très
Thank you,
camusien.
Anne. It was really beautiful and Camusian. My name is Agnes. I've come here very often, and I would just simply like to say that in The Rebel, in Rebellion, we also have the inside out, and you've explained that with all the ethical details. And I just wanted to mention this because I'm really very happy to be here. Thank you.
Bon, ben, moi je crois que restons au présent. Merci Anne encore.
Well, let's stay in the present. Thank you very much.